In this class, we will learn about the basic HTML table tags. There are several different HTML elements that are used in creating an HTML table. To begin, you always need an opening and closing table tag for every table. At minimum, you need one row that is indicated by the opening TR tag and closing TR tag. You will also need at least one cell or data element indicated by the opening TD and the closing TD. You will notice that this table does not look at all like a table. Even though it only contains one word, there are no borders to indicate that it would be a table. If I were to add the HTML border attribute and set it to a value of 1, indicating 1 pixel in thickness, notice what would happen. We would get double lines around our table. The border attribute places a border not only around the table, but around the individual cells. This is why you see a double border. I would like to point out that the border attribute and all table attributes have been deprecated or made obsolete in HTML5. It is useful to understand the HTML table attributes, as we need to learn how they can be replaced with CSS, and we will do this in another class. In order to add more information to your table, you need to add additional rows. Here I have a table with 4 rows. And you can see in the rendered code that indeed I have 4 rows. Notice that in my first row, I do not have TD elements, but TH elements. This is a table header tag, a TH. In HTML, tables are commonly used for information that lends itself to a row-column layout. Therefore, the first row in every column is generally looked upon as a header, and this is useful for accessibility also. Therefore, you will usually see your first row using TH elements. In addition to the TH element being a semantic or meaningful element, it also has some formatting characteristics to it. Notice by default it is bold, and notice by default it is centered. You can't tell that vegetables is centered because the content underneath is shorter than the text in the header. Another characteristic of tables: they will be as wide as they need to be based on the content. They do not automatically extend the full width of the page as other block level elements do. However, the table and the TR elements are block level elements. Should I increase the value of the border attribute, it will increase the outer border only, and it will use a shading effect. It will not affect the inner grid lines. By default, the outer border will be black. That color is not solid black, but shaded. We also have a cell spacing attribute. And what that does, it collapses the outer border and the inner grid lines so that we no longer see those double lines. And this is a more professional look than having those double lines. We also have a cell padding attribute, and that allows you to add padding to the TD elements and the TH element so that the content is more spaciously aligned. Notice that all of these attributes belong in the table tag. They do not belong in the TR, TH, or TD tag. I would also like to point out that all content belongs inside either the TH or the TD. It does not go anywhere else inside the opening and closing table. I can put a width on my table and it will affect the outer table. Notice that because this is an HTML attribute, I do not add the px. It is interpreted as pixels. Notice when my table becomes smaller that the content inside will wrap. Notice that the alignment of these two cells in this row align vertically, not to the top or not to the bottom. They align vertically. We have a v-align attribute that allows us to vertically align the content in our rows. We can align them to the top, to the bottom, or to the center. The v-align attribute works for both the tr element, the td element, and the th element. It does not belong in the table tag. We also have an align attribute, and that will horizontally align the content in the th or the td tags. If this attribute, and the same applies for the v-align attribute, if they are used inside the tr, they will apply to all of the elements inside that row. However, they can also be applied in the individual td or the individual th. Notice that my data in this row is centered. By default, data is left aligned. If you were to use the align attribute set to center in the table tag, that would also center the table. Notice that I have increased the width of my table to 500 pixels. Notice that the browser is not equally dividing my columns. The browser will approximate how much room it needs. If I wanted to set the width of the individual data cells inside the table, I can do that, and it will proportionally change the widths based on the width that I have set for my table. In this case, I am using percents. However, you can use a pixel value. Notice now that all of my cells are evenly proportioned to the same width. You don't need to set the width in every cell, just in the first row, because the following rows will follow based on what is initially set. Notice that we have tomato in the fruit column and also in the vegetable column. Supposing we wanted to merge these two cells so that the word tomato only appears once. We can accomplish that using the colspan attribute, and it is set to a numeric value indicating the number of columns that cell will span. Notice we have to remove the second cell. Typically, the number of cells in a row all have to be the same or balance. Here we only have one cell, but because of the colspan attribute, it is being used twice. Should you forget to remove that cell, you will notice that it still will span. However, now we have a third cell that is pushing its way out of our HTML table. For purposes of demonstration, supposing we had carrots in both the third and the fourth row. Supposing we wanted to merge these two cells so that the word carrot appears once. Now, these are in different rows. So we are looking at a row span attribute. So here we have the row span attribute in our third row, and you can see that carrots is both in row 3 and 4. However, we needed to remove it from the fourth row because it is already accounted for up here. Again, you must have the same amount of cells in every row, and this balances because in the previous row, we have the row span being set. So here we see the row span attribute being set. Again, if we forgot to remove the cell in the fourth row, notice the row span would still take effect. However, we would have essentially 3 cells in our last row, and it would push out into the edge of the table. So all of these HTML attributes, with the exception of row span and colspan, can be replaced with CSS properties, which we will learn in another class.